Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mythic Conversations. 7:30 right now on Wednesday night, which is when we do this live every week. Just getting started, whether you're going to be joining me live shortly or whether you are catching this in replay, either here on the Cabal or on YouTube if this gets posted. Thank you very much for joining. Going to get started with the conversation in a few moments. We've got a bunch of people joining now. Leland, Michael, Mike, Anthony, thank you all very much for joining me tonight, for sticking with me through some of the challenges I've had. David, thank you for joining. David and I were actually going back and forth, showing some customs off. He was showing me some stuff. I was showing him some stuff before the show. So that was a lot of fun getting ready for tonight. Got me in the right mindset to talk Mythic Legions customs tonight. Michael, Leland, Patrick, thank you for joining. Pitter patter, Anthony. Let's get at her. I gotta finish that. Amy, nice to see you. Drew, Jay, Douglas, CJ, Mike, everybody, thank you very much for joining me tonight here on Mythic Conversations. Got a fun show tonight. Definitely have some cool stuff to talk about. There's some cool news to talk about as well. Also, I'm going to have some stuff to talk about the show and what some of the future plans are for Mythic Conversations. So let me ask, so far, I know last week, unfortunately, we had some challenges with both the audio and the video. I'm using my webcam tonight as opposed to the really expensive camera that I usually use, specifically because I was having some camera issues just when I was setting this up tonight. And I'll talk more about that later. But so far, how does the audio sound so far? If you guys wouldn't mind just telling me in the chat, is the audio okay? Am I sounding clear? Let me know. Rob, thanks for joining. Ivan, Chun, thank you all for being here this evening. How's the audio sound, guys? Okay? Is it choppy? I know it's been tough because I know like last week, for instance, it seemed that it started okay, but then it got choppy as we went along. So hopefully we won't have that tonight. I'm waiting for someone to tell me. Give me some insight. Pretty good. Sounds good. Excellent. Okay, crystal clear. Very good. So let's get started. Thank you for joining me tonight for Mythic Conversations. If you are joining for the first time, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer, and I also have the distinct privilege of working as the digital marketing manager with Four Horsemen Studios, where I get to be in charge of all the content that you see at sourcehorseman.com. If you want to see more of my custom work, some of which we're going to look at tonight, you can follow me on Instagram at Mythic Customs, all one word. You can also check out my website, www.mythiccustoms.com, again, all one word. All of my customs, including most of what we're going to look at tonight, are featured on that site. There's lots of photos, there's lots of information, there's recipes, in the whole 9 yards. So if anything that we're talking about tonight inspires you and you want more information about how maybe you can make one for yourself, the website is where you'll get that information. Also, it's called Mythic Conversations for a reason. This is filmed live every Wednesday night at 7:30 here on the Mythic Legions Cabal. So the live aspect of it, the conversation aspect, is with you. Please let me know if there's something you want to talk about, if you have questions along the way, whether it's pertaining to exactly what I'm speaking about at that moment or whether it's the larger realm of Mythic Legions. I'm happy to do what I can to answer those questions for you. So you can get started like we do most weeks talking about news. I swear that I don't plan this and I don't have some conspiracy with the studio, but it seems like on Wednesday nights, shortly before I go live, they drop like a bombshell type teaser on their Instagram and Facebook pages. Over the last, weeks, over the last month or so, we've seen, the cool shoulder pauldrons. Then we saw that cool, like, double-sided hammer. It kind of had, like, two almost like yak heads or wildebeest heads. And it clearly looked like it went on an ogre-scale handle, which is appropriate since we're going to be talking a lot about ogres tonight. But we saw those were super cool. We saw the big moose antlers as like a helmet attachment, and then today we see that awesome head reveal. So cool. I mean, how great is that sculpture? I got to see that when I went to the studio. I still can't tell you what it's for, but I'm super excited that people are starting to see some of the stuff that they had there in development. I know that I'm super excited for that. That's a collaboration that they've worked on with Nate Barch. You can see every week when they share the 3D sculpture. It's actually like a 3D print that they're sharing. When they show that the render, then Nate's been sharing the concept art right behind it. So that's been super cool to see the artwork that gave life to the piece that we're eventually going to have in our collections. So that was awesome. I was super excited to see that. Justin and Josh, thank you very much for joining. Other news going on right now. I mean, it's obviously with the quarantine and everything happening, it's been a little bit light. There's not a lot of toy news in general happening right now. So it's nice to see companies teasing that, the Four Horsemen. I'm anticipating we're going to see more of that with like San Diego Comic-Con just getting canceled. I know that Comic-Con isn't for normally a few months from now, but with San Diego Comic-Con getting canceled, that's definitely going to change the plans for a lot of toy companies. I'm sure they plan to reveal stuff there. So without that avenue to do so, I have to anticipate we're going to start seeing stuff online. Websites like, Hasbro, they have the Hasbro Pulse, where it's not only their e-commerce platform, but they try to put some articles up there as well, and some cool content. So I'm sure they're going to be, releasing a bunch of stuff. NECA as well. They do really well with social media. And of course, sourcehorseman.com. We're always revealing cool stuff there, plus the social media that, the guys do, the studio does. So lots of cool stuff to come, not only from Four Horsemen Studios, and that'll be nice to break up some of the monotony, something to look forward to. Other news, so you may have seen last week, I was super excited to talk about the Legend of the Kitsune series that I was fortunate enough to work on. Super excited for those. My apologies for all of you who tuned in last week. The audio quality, the video quality, we lost video. I know I've had some audio issues here and there on different weeks, but the audio quality was definitely very bad last week. The fact that the video dropped towards the end and we had to restart, that's unfortunate. That's unacceptable to me. And again, I'm going to talk at the end of the show about what I plan to do to address those issues. But I'm sure you got the gist of it, and certainly if you're on the Cabal, you saw all of the photos of the Fox Customs. By the way, my apologies for that. I know that it got a little heavy during the week there as I was posting, twice a day, different photos of the Kitsune. I promise it's not something I will usually do. I was super excited. I had a lot of stuff to show. Like I had said last week, that was a project that I'd been working on for months and months without sharing anything. So I had so much I wanted to share leading up to last Wednesday when I officially showed all those pieces. And I was able to be the mouthpiece. I'm a marketing guy, an audience. I just enjoy it. I enjoy that back and forth with an audience. I enjoy presenting, especially when it's something like this that I'm passionate about. But ultimately, this is Len's project. This is my friend Len's company, Wolf King Productions. So he's kind of taken the reins from me. After last week, he started posting, showing some of the cool stuff that he's doing. And then he just posted yesterday, he announced that the pre-sale for the first run of the painted heads for those Legends of the Kitsune figures, that's going to be happening this coming Saturday. So this Saturday, April 25th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, he's going to be putting those live. That sale is going to happen. You can go to the website now. It's www.wolfkingcustoms.com. You can see what's going to be available. You can see the prices. Like we showed last week, the heads are going to come in 3 different colors: classic orange, the evil black, or the Arctic white. You'll be able to pick which ones you want. You can buy just the heads, or you can buy a set of the head with the tail, or both heads and the tail together. The tails are not being sold separately during the painted sale, but once the painted sale's done, he is going to do an unpainted sale down the road pretty quickly. It's not going to be very long, but he's going to do that. And you would, if you just want a tail, you would be able to just buy the tail in that unpainted sale. So if you're interested in those Kitsune sets, if you wanted one for yourself, and by the way, thank you so much for all the praise. So many people reached out to me and just were genuinely excited about the project. Again, I thought it was really cool because it's so different than everything else that I think other people are putting out right now. I mean, I've said it before, it is a great time to be a Mythic Legions collector. Some of the stuff we're going to look at tonight, include custom heads and custom pieces from, Matt O'Toole and Castle of Power, from My Action Figure Customs. I've got some stuff from Len, some of the things that he's going to be coming out with Wolf King Customs. In the past, I've shown work from other people like, Emil Wickman and Walter DeMarco and Saba Dom. There's so many artists putting out cool stuff. It's a great time to be a collector, to have so many choices available to you. So thank you for reaching out, because like I said, everyone's doing different things. Different artists have different inspirations, different things they like to see. So I think that it's cool that Len, what he's doing, his ideas, he really likes a lot of the woodland creatures. So I was excited that he was able to put those out. So Saturday, 3 o'clock, wolfkingcustoms.com. Joe Crazy Bill, good evening, Jeremy. Good evening to you, Joe. Chun says, how much time a day do you have for making customs? Is there more than one of you making all these splendid figures? No, it is just me. So I tend to work, or I'm an early riser, so I tend to work early in the morning, especially on weekends. On weekends, even, before the quarantine and all that, on weekends, I tend to wake up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. My cat wakes me up a lot of mornings, and I get up and I have a hard time going back to sleep. So I just get up, I grab a cup of coffee, I come downstairs, and I start painting. One thing I will say is I tend to work on more than one custom at a time. I think I said a few weeks ago that I had 40 some odd projects in different stages of completion in the back room. That obviously helps me put out stuff somewhat quickly, or not quickly, but it helps me produce things because I'm not working on one project at a time. Something as simple as painting. If I do a paint a color on something, I was just painting a project before this show started actually, and I put a base coat on it, but then to do details like teeth and eyes and stuff like that, I gotta wait for that first layer to dry. So if I have to wait, if I'm not doing anything else, if I'm working on one custom, I'm not maximizing the time I have. So I typically have a bunch of things out at once. I try to paint similar colors at once. Like if I put some black in the paint tray, I look at what I'm painting, like what different projects I have, and I try to paint as many black pieces as possible all at once to try to maximize the time that I do spend. I will admit that I do probably spend a little more time than I'd like to do it. Some of my other interests have kind of suffered a little bit as of late because I have been spending so much time on customs. So I am trying to strike that balance as well. But I don't spend as much time as you probably think. I definitely know I'm pretty prolific in how much I put out. Part of that is just doing it a lot. You get faster at it, you get better at it, and I'm constantly having new ideas. So. But yes, there is just one of me doing this. Luis and Vernon, nice to see you here. Walter, buddy, thanks for joining. Daniel, fired up for the Kitsune. Awesome. Steve Bishotti, nice to see you here. Daniel says, I just bought an articulated icon samurai just to strip the armor and weapons for my fox. Awesome, man. If you need information on how to do that, one of the previous episodes of Mythic Conversations, maybe episode 2, I actually took apart a articulated icon samurai to talk about that, so that will help as well. Travis, nice to see you here. Walter, what's going on? My name is Walter. I watch Wednesday nights with Jeremy. Thank you very much. Drew says, how long will the pre-order be for the Kitsune heads? It's not a timed pre-order. It's a specific number of pieces. So it depends on how quickly those pieces sell out. When he does the unpainted pre-order, I think he's going to make that a period of time because those just need to be printed. For the painted ones, he's already been printing, but because they are painted, and Drew, I'm sure having you doing some painting for My Action Figure Customs, I'm sure you can appreciate this. You can only realistically paint so many pieces in a reasonable amount of time, especially with this set, because there are the 2 different style heads and the tails. The tails actually get painted differently than the heads do. So you kind of you can't do them all at once. You can do both sets of heads at once. You got to do the tails separately. The tails are actually a super pain to paint only because they're so big. Just like spraying them down with the base coat, you really, especially if you have a quantity of them, you have to lay them down and do a couple different coats of it to get that painted. So the number that we established was a number so we realistically can get them printed, painted, and shipped in a reasonable amount of time. I think the turnaround on the website is listed as 4 to 6 weeks. So it's not going to be a timed amount of for the pre-order. Very much going to be like once those pieces sell out, they're going to go out of stock. If you miss it, don't freak out because there will be the unpainted order. And if you really, really want a painted set, if the interest is there, we'll do a second run. It just may take a little bit of time for us to get through me painting that first run and then him printing the second run. I have nothing to do with the second run with just the prints. So he'll do those a little quicker. He doesn't have to worry about me and my schedule. But definitely if you are interested, I would say try to be there when Saturday at 3 o'clock. I know last week some people said, please limit the amount. We want people to have these. So Len is going to do the best he can to make sure there's no one going in there and trying to buy up half the run to do whatever with. So we are going to be cognizant of that. If you want one, get in there around, at 3 o'clock, and you should get them. Eric, thank you for joining. Walter says his finger cramped hitting the like button. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Joe's saying that he used to do that with G.I. Joe Customs. He'd have like 30 to 40 works in progress. Yeah, part of it is you just, like I said, you try to maximize the time you're spending in the workshop. Additionally, I just get different ideas. Like you probably saw last week, I posted the gigantic 40 or 50 pound boxes of Lord of the Rings figures that I got in, and it was too much that even I didn't need all of it. Like there was parts in there that I already had a couple of, so I ended up selling a bunch of them on the Cabal for actually really good prices, just to try to help out some fellow customizers as well. When you get a bunch of fodder in like that, it starts to get the creative juices flowing. You start thinking, oh, I'm going to slap this over here. Just going back there and playing. Some Saturday mornings, that's what I'm doing. I'm not even focused on specific projects, trying to get them done. Sometimes it's just me back there messing around with parts, or even weekday mornings messing around with parts before my day starts. And the more you do that, you start getting half-completed pieces. The trick is actually getting the time to complete them, of course. So excited about the sale. Thank you very much, Eric. Joe, yo, buddy. Nice to see you here. Travis, Eddie. A lot of people joining tonight. Thank you all very, very much. This is awesome. This is a lot of people, a lot of my regulars, a lot of people that I see every week, but there's a lot of people in here as well that I don't see every single week. So I know a lot of you catching in replay, but thank you very much for joining me live tonight. So the topic at hand is ogres. We're going to talk about ogres tonight because I love the ogre-scale figures, and I do see a lot of people using different parts to customize their ogres. And every time I see someone post a custom ogre, including myself, a lot of people jump in and they're like, where did you get these parts? Where did you get these parts? And I've talked at length about using things like Lord of the Rings and Masters of the Universe. I've talked about using those kinds of figures for Mythic Legions customs, but those aren't going to really scale with the ogres. So I thought it would be fun to talk tonight specifically about the kinds of parts that you can use to outfit your ogres to get some variety. And the ogre scale figures, they're really interesting. Justin saying he wants to know more about the gladiator looking figure. Yeah, that's the Ogre King. I'll talk about him in a bit. In general, though, the ogres are an interesting figure because if you think about the way Mythic Legions figures have been released, we had that first set, the first Kickstarter 1.0, whatever you want to call it, that when those came in, part of the toy line's design from the beginning was customization. And when we got Series 1 in, we immediately had a extensive parts library of different heads, of different body parts. I mean, we had multiple torsos, the armored torso, like the cloth-looking torso. We had the muscled torso that like the barbarians and the orc came with. But then we also, like I said, tons of heads, tons of weapons. We had the general weapons, and then we had the weapons packs, which added a whole bunch of other weapons to what we could actually work with just within Mythic Legions. Multiple kinds of arm pieces and leg pieces. So much variety to work with as customizers right with that first release. The second kind of figures that Mythic Legions came out with were the trolls. And they were the polar opposite. The trolls did not lend themselves to customization for a few reasons. Number one, they were $100 a pop. And that's if you bought them pre-order. Forget about secondary market where, now some of those trolls, Brontis and the Forest Troll, those things are hitting $300 and plus in a lot of cases. The body construction of them doesn't really lend themselves to being swapped. And really, what would you swap with? When we got the Stone Troll and the Forest Troll, they were the same bodies, exact same bodies, different heads. And then even once we got Brontis, exact same body, just different head, different loin type piece. So there's really no reason to be swapping those parts from a customizing standpoint. Obviously, we got 2.0 and those type of figures. Those gave us all new body styles. But 2.0 was very much in the vein of the original figures, the same kind of construction. It wasn't until we got the ogres that I think we had kind of that happy medium where they were larger figures, not as large as the trolls, but they were much larger than everything else in the line. Parts from the regular line don't scale with the trolls. I'm not really going to take, I've seen some people take like the big double-sided axe and give it to one of the ogres, and it kind of works. But for most part, you're not going to be using normal pieces with the ogres. But similarly, they do have customizability to them. The way the bodies are constructed, they can pop apart and everything, but we didn't get a lot of variety. So we have the ability to customize, but not a lot of the parts. If we look, the first wave we got ogres in was Siege of Bjorngar. So the Siege wave gave us the Kurzog, the green ogre, as well as the Ogre Legion builder, and then we had Balthar the Tower. So we had a green body, and then we had the flesh-colored body. We had a couple different heads, and we had a few different weapons. I like the fact that they gave us those poles that were interconnected, so you could make shorter weapons or you could make longer weapons. And then we got either the axe topper or like the mace topper. Shortly after, we obviously got Archimedes, so we got a gray body type, a new head with the Cyclops there. We got the helmet piece. But ultimately, that's really what we've had to work with. So I know when I started thinking about customs for ogres, the first thing I did was say, okay, what other toy lines can I draw some pieces from for this scale, for these figures. And the place that I landed very, very quickly was actually a totally different scale from Mythic Legions. Mythic Legions is typically referred to as being 1/12 scale. So when you look as a toy collector, the different scales, you have like the 3 3/4 inch like G.I. Joes or like the original Star Wars figures. Those are 1/18 scale. Then you have 1/12 scale, which is things like Marvel Legends, 1/12 scale or 6-inch scale figures. That's what I collect. Mythic Legions falls into that realm. Now, Mythic Legions, the standard figures, they're a little bit bigger than Marvel Legends. Like if you compare a Marvel Legends figure to a standard Mythic Legions, even like a 2.0, like an Elf or something, I still think Mythic Legions is a little bigger, but they kind of fall in that same category. There's that 1/12. And then you've got 1/6. So 1/6 is like 12-inch figures. I've sold off a lot of my 12-inch figures I've actually sold them all off. I sold off really everything that wasn't that 1/12 scale. But the great thing about the 1/6 scale, the 12-inch figures, is there's a ton of them. There are so many companies producing that scale of figure. They're often rather expensive. Whether you're talking about, there's some that are cheaper, like some older ones, this older 12-inch Hasbro not Hasbro, who did the old Lord of the Rings Toy Biz? So like this old 12-inch Toy Biz Lord of the Rings figures, the quality's not very good, the accessories are not great, but they're usable. And then you go all the way up to stuff like Hot Toys, which is very, very expensive. But within that range, there's so many parts that you can use. And the great thing about that scale is there's a huge customizing market, a huge customizing fan base for that scale. So whenever there's going to be customs, there's going to be fodder. And there's a ton of pieces that you can use from 12-inch figures across your ogres. We're going to look at some tonight. I'm going to give you some examples of where you can buy some of these parts. And we're going to look at a couple other lines as well where you might be able to grab some pieces from. Sound good? Let's see what we got for comments before I start showing stuff off. Let's see. Travis is saying the ogres are amazing, so much bang for your buck. Yeah, especially the Ogre Legion Builder. The Ogre Legion Builder being, what was that, $40 on pre-order? And even now on Big Bad Toy Store, it's $49.99. I placed an order on Big Bad Toy Store the other day, and I bought an Ogre Legion Builder just because it was $50. And I was like, well, you know what? I don't have one in my fodder pile. Let me grab one just to have it. It's actually right here. It's funny that I bought it, and then like the next day or 2 days later after it came in, I got a head from Sabadam that we're going to look at in a bit, and I popped it right on there. So yeah, they're incredible, incredible value. And Mike actually just said that, yeah, especially the builders. I wonder if Hot Toys Gladiator Hulk weapons would work. Yeah, they probably would, but I wouldn't recommend using Hot Toys for this type of stuff just because they're so expensive. And you could probably find stuff that's close. Chris, Paul, thank you for joining. So when it comes to 12-inch figure parts, there are a number of companies that you can look up. There's one company that, frankly, I don't know what they do. Like, I don't know, but they do a lot of female figures. And that's one of the things, too, that's useful is these are not 12 inches. They're a little bit shorter than 12-inch. So if you had like a true 12-inch figure, the weapons and accessories are probably a little too big. But the great thing is you can fudge that. Because they're ogres, it's okay if they have these wildly oversized weapons. Like, this is my ogre samurai. And this particular custom features a custom head from Matt O'Toole, Castle of Power, with this 12-inch scale armor and these gigantic blades that are actually chained together. Now, these are from a variety of different places. This armor here is from a company, I believe they're called Dao Toys, D-A-O Toys, but they did a figure called Dark Samurai. I kid you not, it was a Darth Vader samurai figure. which makes sense since samurai armor inspired some of the, costume design, inspired some of the Darth Vader armor. But they did this, and this is actually 12-inch scale armor for that figure. It works really well on the ogres because even though it's made for a figure that's a little bit bigger, this is a bulky figure. The frame that it was meant to go on is a little more slender, so it fits really well on here. And I actually like the way that it fattens the midsection a bit. And then these swords here come from a company, I believe they're called, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Phicen. It's P-H-I-C-E-N. And I tell you that because when you look these things up on, say, eBay, that's what you want to look for. Look up something like Phicen sword, and I guarantee you will find a bunch of options. Phicen axe. They do a lot of these different figures, a lot of female warrior figures. These giant blades came from a figure called Warrior Kane, Kaine, I believe is how it was spelled. But it was something I found online. I honestly didn't even know how big they were. When I got them, they were larger than I expected them to be. But because it's an ogre, it worked really, really well. And that is the first tip I want to give you is use eBay. You can find a ton of these parts on eBay. And when you find parts, jot down what search terms you use to find them and look at some of the sellers. When you see some of these things, look at sellers' other items because there are a handful of sellers. I mean, it's more than a handful. There's plenty of them, but you will definitely find a handful that this is what they do. They buy 12-inch figures and they part them out for customs. It's exactly what Kurt Daniels, Camaro dude, has done with Mythic Legions for quite some time now. He buys figures, he parts them out, and customizers pick the pieces up. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Look at the prices that he's getting for those parts. The culmination of all of those pieces equates to way, way more than the price of that one figure is going for at that time. Now, obviously, he's going to sell some of the key parts and be stuck with others, and it's part of the business. But my point is that there are people parting these things out. Just like Kurt parted them out for Mythic Legions, there's lots of people parting these out for 12-inch figures, and you can pick up some stuff actually at really, really good prices. Another place that you can do, here's another tip, there's a website called Monkey Depot. monkeydepot.com is a website that is all they do. They buy 12-inch figures and they part out the pieces. Now, some of them are not going to be usable. Some of the pieces they have are military themed or science fiction themed, Star Wars parts, World War II figures. You're probably not going to be using any of those parts in your Mythic Legions ogres, but they also have a lot of medieval stuff. They have axes and armor and swords and things like that. So give that a look. eBay's a great resource. Monkey Depot is another one that you can look up and you can find some of these parts. So yeah, we were talking about the Ogre Samurai. That is just one there. And that's a variety of parts. Let's step back for a second and look at some parts that I think are pretty easy to find right now. Nate, thank you very much for joining. By the way, speaking of Nate Barch just joined. If you're not familiar with Nate, does all of the packaging art for the Mythic Legions line. If you have not yet listened to the most recent episode of Legions Cast, do so. Go right to sourcehorseman.com. Right on the homepage, there's the latest podcast, and that one's there. Nate was their guest recently. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful interview. I mean, not only is he incredibly talented and he has great stories to tell, if you're a Mythic Legions fan, it's really, really interesting to hear about his involvement in the line. But he's also just genuinely a really, really cool guy. I've been fortunate to meet Nate a few times and chat with him. And trust me, listening to his interview, what a likable guy he is, comes across, and it's just fascinating stuff as well. So check that out. Nate, thank you very much for joining and allowing me to gush about what a cool guy you are for a minute. So I said I'm going to talk about a line that I think you can use right now with Mythic Legions. And this is the 12-inch Masters of the Universe line by Mondo. So if you're not familiar with Mondo, their website is Mondo Tees, like t-shirts, .com. They were a company that they got their start I would assume they got their start doing t-shirts, but when I first got introduced to them, they were doing like limited edition art prints and stuff, and they still have a lot of that. But they've gotten into toys recently, and they're the ones that are doing this 12-inch line of Masters of the Universe figures. They've got a number of them out so far, and you can find a lot of these pieces, a lot of the weapons on eBay now. Now, fair warning, some of the weapons that are out there are bootlegs. So you have to decide for yourself, whether you're comfortable with that, if you want to buy the bootleg ones or not. I actually got a bunch of pieces from one of those people that part out figures, so they weren't bootlegs, they were actually real things. But this is one of the cool pieces that a couple of them come with. So this bone sword comes with both the Skeletor figure as well as I think Faker might come with it as well, and Scareglow comes with, I think, 2 of them. But it's a great looking weapon. I mean, the quality of it feels really cool. It's really well painted, and it looks really, really cool in their hands. And this is not a custom. I mean, I literally took a Ogre Legion builder. I swapped out the Balthar horns. From some of my other customs, I ended up with some of the painted chest and loin pieces. So I ended up throwing them on here because I've been too lazy to paint an Ogre Legion builder myself. I've seen a lot of people doing that. These are a great canvas for painting, by the way, especially because they're a little bit bigger. So if you're intimidated, the bigger area might actually make it easier to do that. I've seen Steve Bisciotti paint a bunch of these up for Travis, or a few of them for Travis, and beautiful, beautiful work, everything he did with all of the leather and the fur around the armor. So this isn't a real heavy custom, but even just adding these weapons, I really think starts to change the look of the figure, and it gives them some cool new accessories that you can use. I did the same thing here with Balthar. So I've seen a lot of people using these axes. So this is one of the axes from that Mondo line. And this one is actually from Faker, I believe. And I just think that style axe looks really, really cool with the Balthar. And this is an example, too, of a couple different parts. So, that shield, I like the look of that shield. It's actually from a 12-inch Lord of the Rings figure. I think it came with King Theoden. So all of the characters from Rohan had, they had a very similar aesthetic, obviously a lot of horse motifs and everything. I feel that's got that design there as well. There's no actual horses on it. Are there? No, there's no horses in the design, but it works really, really well. I like it with this character. And even on his back, he's got this big giant sword. That this is just something where I went on like Monkey Depot and I typed in, 112. I typed in sword there because everything they have is 1/6 scale. But even on eBay, if you type in 1/6 scale sword or just 1/6, 1:6 sword, you'll find a bunch of these things. And sometimes they're actually pretty inexpensive. You can get them at a really, really good price. Even just outfitting him simply with new weapons like that. I know people get intimidated about some of the more complex customs. This is super, super easy to do. All I did here is I wanted to give him different color horns. I painted the horns, with some dry brushing with like a bone color to change the look, and then I gave him some new weapons. Really, really simple. But that line, that Masters of the Universe line by Mondo, wonderful, wonderful fodder. And to give you an example of how much bigger they actually are, I do have one Mondo figure. I got the Merman just because I thought it looked so cool, especially this one with the custom this is the Mondo website exclusive. You could buy this figure from like Big Bad Toy Store and, you know, a couple different places, but it came with only 2 heads. It came with a head that looked like the original toy, and then it came with another very cool merman head. But this artist exclusive one was only available on the Mondo website, and I really, really liked the look of this particular head, so I bought that. But if you compare, you know, look how much bigger that is. So when we talk about, when I say, oh yeah, you're using 1/12 scale, 1/6 scale weapons, 12-inch figure scale weapons, that is how much bigger a 12-inch figure is to the ogre scale. So that's what I'm saying is you're going to find some weapons that are actually too big, some that are too small, some that are too big. The nice thing though is, like I said, because they're ogres, too big kind of can work, you know, even like, so this is this awesome spare that he comes with here. And you got this great spare. You know, you put this in one of these ogre hands, and I mean, it's big, but it works. You can you know, make them look really cool with it. I mean, even the ogres themselves came with the poles to make these things really, really big. So I mean, that works. As much bigger as that figure is to begin with, that still is doable. Very cool figure. So the Mondo figures, that's one thing to look at. And knowing where the parts come from, you can look up that on eBay too. You can look up, you know, Mondo Masters of the Universe. What I often do is I will flip the search to go lowest priced first, because obviously the lower priced stuff is going to be pieces. You know, the full figures, you don't need to buy the full figure if you don't want the full figure just to get an axe. You can probably find some of that stuff in there. And again, when you find sellers that sell this stuff, look at what else they have available. So in that same vein, let's look at this guy here, because this is without a doubt the most expensive custom, well, one of the most, actually, you know what, it is probably the most expensive custom I've done purely from a parts standpoint. This is my version of the Dungeons and Dragons Ogre King. So if you look at the old Dungeons and Dragons toy line by LJN, this is the line that had Warduke in it. So I know a ton of Mythic Legions fans have created their version of Warduke. A lot of us did it back at Series 1. We took like an Atlas figure and we popped the helmeted head, the extra head that came with the Barbarian with the bat wings. You know, we popped that head on an Atlas, and that was our first version of, you know, not Warduke. And then later on, the studio obviously gave us Rhaegor, that wonderful tribute figure, which has that same head and the bat wings, but actually painted in a very similar color scheme to what the Warduke character came with anyway. So a lot of us have put together Wardukes. There have been others that I have a strong heart as well that I've put together using a Knight Legion, not a Legion builder, but like the Knight builder set, the large set. I used that body, but with a Gideon head that I painted silver. I've seen other people do a number of other characters from that old LJN line. So I was looking at them when the ogre-scale came out, and one thing, what inspired me to do this was honestly this helmet. So this is the helmet that came with Archimedes, and if you look up that old LJN Ogre King, it came with a helmet that was remarkably similar in design, the way that it comes in the back. I've never asked Eric this, but I have to imagine that design was an influence on this in some way, conscious or subconscious. I know Eric's a similar age to myself, so he played with these as well. But as soon as I saw that, and this is how it happens for me sometimes, I see a piece as simple as this, and I say, that's really, really cool. That would be a starting point for an Ogre King custom. what other parts would I need? So then I look at the figure itself. I look at the original figure, and I see all the design of him. And if you look at the original posts I did for that custom, either on my website or on my Instagram page, I posted side-by-side shots with the original LJN figure. And I tried to break down all the different pieces. The original LJN figure came with not only this style helmet, but he came with a big curved sword like this. On his back, in the sculpture, it had like a Chris dagger, a wavy dagger, and he had a mace that he came with, and he had this big shield that had a snake on it. His belt had like a big bull's head, and the armor came up around his midsection, and he had sandaled feet. These are all pieces of the original Ogre King figure from the 80s. So knowing all that, I started saying, okay, what parts would I need? And I started sourcing these parts. This particular figure, just the pieces that are on him, cost me $150 just to get the parts. And I do admit that is atypical. I don't usually spend that much on parts to put together a custom, but this was one that I treated it like a design challenge. I wanted to see how close I could get to that character to make the tribute, and this is one of my favorite pieces I've done because I really do feel like it hits on all of those different design pieces. And there's a lot to look at here. His knee pads. His knee pads were actually shoulder armor from one of those. I mentioned that company, Ficine. A lot of female 12-inch figures. These were actually meant to be shoulder armor for Ficine that I took and I pulled them apart, and I actually pulled the front of the ogre-scale knee pads off, and I glued these where those would be glued to give new knee pads. All of these belts, even like the Ogre King custom had, the original figure has like a chainmail lower arm. So this is actually a piece of fabric that looks like chainmail that goes over. And even you can see here, this piece here, which is the original figure, has like some armor that comes down. This is actually a piece of Mythic Legions folds armor that I cut and I glued up there to make that part of the design. But this just uses an extremely large amount of parts that I sourced from a number of different places, including like even his sandals here. His sandals, I'm talking about 12-inch figures, his sandals actually came from a Marvel Legends Gladiator Hulk, like the one from Ragnarok, Build-A-Figure. So that Build-A-Figure comes with those rubbery sandals that actually can be removed. I removed those and I put them on him, which is another tip that I want to give you. Don't only think about 12-inch scale figures or 1/6 scale figures. In other toy lines, look for big characters. Okay, so Hulk is a big character. The body parts on him, the accessories on him, by nature are going to be bigger than other figures in that line because he's a big character. Some of those big characters have parts that work really, really well with Mythic Legions ogres also. So case in point, let's look at this guy here. So this is my mountain ogre. Now, this mountain ogre uses a variety of different pieces that I want to talk you through, because this is a great example of sourcing pieces from other, lots of places. There are some 1/6 scale figure pieces on here. There are some other parts from non-1/6 scale, and this head is custom 3D printed by My Action Figure Customs. So starting with that head, you can see that there. That's, when I got that head from My Action Figure Customs, I wanted to, a lot of people were painting it green, so I said, let me do something different. I want to paint this to go with the Archimedes body. I want to make a new kind of ogre. I'm going to call them a mountain ogre. And I imagine them having a lot of, wearing bones and stuff like that, always being hungry. So I started looking for a lot of bones. And, I talked about 12-inch figure parts. So this gigantic club he is wielding, that comes from a 12-inch, also by that company Ficine. It's a 12-inch scale Hercules figure. This pot that he's got full of bones, that's also from a 12-inch figure. I don't even know what figure it came from. I found that on Monkey Depot. I was just looking through their categories, and I just saw a metal pot, and I said, it was like $5, and I said, I'll find a use for that, so I picked it up. But all these other parts don't come from that scale figure. So this loin piece that he's got at his waist, right, and this bone necklace, that actually comes from a Marvel Select Barbarian Hulk. So I just said that other lines, large figures in those lines, like a Hulk, there are parts that you can actually use there. Great pieces that I was able to use on here. Similarly, all these bones that are in his pot and the bones around his waist, that comes from an old McFarlane Toys Poacher figure. So Poacher was like an elephant figure. To this day, one of my favorite figures. I always loved that character. But he's actually a little bit bigger to begin with, and he's got these oversized bones because that figure was meant to be like a trophy hunter. Those work really well. So that's my second tip. Look for large figures in other lines that you may have in your collection, or you may find at toy shows or flea markets and things like that, because sometimes their accessories can be used in ways like this. I'm going to talk more about the 3D heads in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to show you a couple more pieces here. So this is another example that combines some parts. So this is one I posted yesterday that got a ton of likes. This is always a super popular one whenever I post it. And once again, this combines pieces. So this sword, this is my drowned ogre. Okay, so this custom head is from My Action Figure Customs. And this was actually an exclusive that he debuted at the Legions Con event in New Jersey last year. Wonderful piece. And once again, when it first came out, the only ogres that were available were either Balthar the Tower or the two green ogres. So everyone started painting it green because it looks like Cthulhu. And everyone was like, oh, I'm going to make Cthulhu. I knew Archimedes was coming out, and I knew I didn't want to follow suit with what everyone was doing, so I held it back and I didn't paint this at first. I waited till I had an Archimedes, and I painted it like that to make what I called a drowned ogre. So I wanted it to look very watery. I wanted it to look like it had rusted armor, and it was a denizen of the deep. So this sword is from a 12-inch scale figure, but this big staff he's got, which is huge, that actually comes from that same McFarlane Toys Poacher figure. And then the other pieces that make this up, like all of these fishing nets that he has on him. A bunch of people commented that they really like the look of the fishing nets. These are from a craft store. I went to Michael's and I just looked at different things they had there, different little pieces of leather and pieces of this fabric. And I just grabbed a bunch of different stuff to throw in a bag in the back in the workshop to use when I see fit. And it worked really well here. So you can look outside of toys to get other pieces as well. This turtle shell that he has lashed to his arm there, that was like a cheap little kid's toy, like $1 little toy that I got, tore the shell off, and gave it a nice paint job to make it look more realistic. And I just lashed it to his arm with some like a suede cord that I also got from Michael's. So you can start combining parts like that from other toy lines, from non-toy lines, to create the scale that you want for these figures. I see tons of likes coming in on the Drowned Ogre. Thank you very much. Yeah, he's a very popular one for sure. So let's talk about 3D heads for a minute. Again, I said at the top of the show, there's so many companies doing 3D stuff these days. I've just shown two of them. This, drowned ogre head, or that Cthulhu-like head, was from My Action Figure Customs, as was the mountain ogre head that I showed. Um, those are really cool. One thing I haven't done is use like 12-inch figure scale heads on these. There's been a few that I've looked at that are more helmeted that I've considered, but I haven't tried that yet. And I haven't really thought I needed to because there have been some 3D prints coming out. Like I said, definitely the one that's most prolific is my action figure customs. But besides those two, I know they also did one that I have it in back. I haven't painted it yet. That Nikki did one recently. If you saw Nikki Nicole Cheney, she did a frost. She called it a frost giant, but whatever, frost half giant, whatever you want to call it. That looked really, really good. I believe Chris Miller, I think that was the other one. He did one too that he did his first and then she followed suit. I'm sure she was working on it. But they both had a really similar idea of what to do with that head, which is awesome. Unfortunately, I had the same idea and now I'm not going to do it because that's kind of how I work, where when I get a part, if I intend to use it a certain way, and if I see someone beat me to the punch, I tend to lose my fire for doing it, which is good and bad because it makes me think past the initial. When you see something, you say, oh, I'm going to make that a frost giant. If someone gets to it first, you have to look at it again and say, okay, well, what else could it be? And that's where some of the most creative ideas come in. Like I said, seeing this when Rob from My Action Figure Customs first showed that, he sent me graphics of that while I was promoting Legions Con so I could tease it so people could know that was going to be there. And like everybody, as soon as I saw it, I saw Cthulhu. And, I imagined painting it green. And the fact that everyone was doing that and I wanted to hold off allowed me to create this, which I'm much, much happier with. And I say that having painted one green. At Legions Con, I bought two. One for myself and one for my son, and my son really wanted a green one. So I've actually painted one green, and he has it in his room, and I'm much happier with mine. So sometimes actually having to think past the initial idea, I think will create a better product anyway. But you can definitely do that with the 3D heads. That's something to look at as well. Sabadam, if you're familiar with him, and unfortunately his website is planetarydogtoys.com. They apparently experienced a few problems with PayPal payment systems this week, so they kind of shut down ordering for the time being. They're going to be reopening that back up soon, and he's been putting up some really cool stuff. And one of the things that he's been doing that's really cool is he's been doing certain heads, and he's been offering them in both like the 6-inch and the 9-inch scale. So he's been offering these heads that you could get them printed in the smaller size and use it like for an orc, or you can get it printed in the larger size and use it on like an ogre. So this is one that's not even done painting yet. Like all I've done with him, whenever I get these 3D pieces, I tend to base it out in black. So I spray painted it black, and then this has just got some green dry brushing on it to try to start matching the body color. And it's the first layer. It's not fully matched yet. Obviously, I haven't painted the teeth, haven't painted the eyes or anything like that. But a really cool addition. He's putting out some really cool stuff, and he's doing it pretty frequently. He's got a lot of cool ideas. He's got a lot of, I was talking earlier about Len having some ideas that are different than what everyone else is doing. Saba's got some like out there ideas. Some of his designs, some of his big helmets and stuff, they're very, very cool. So look at him out. Obviously everyone knows about My Action Figure Customs. You've been checking them out. They're taking a little bit of a break. But in the meantime, Sabadam, Planetary Dog Toys, if you're looking for some 3D heads, he's got some really, really cool ones, and they're reasonably priced. What else? So other stuff that you can use, a lot of what I've been looking at is weapons. Shields, swords, maces, axes, etc. We did look at the armor on the samurai, and that's the next thing I want to encourage you to do is think beyond weapons. Yeah, it's awesome to outfit your ogres with new weapons so they're not all using the same pieces. But if you start finding cool other pieces like armor pieces, you can really change the look of these ogres in a much more dramatic way than just changing out their weapons. So one of my favorite pieces is this right here. So this is what I did with Archimedes. I wanted Archimedes to have a bit of a different look. I didn't want him to have all the same armor as my other ogres. So I went hunting to outfit him with some new pieces. And, he's got this, I showed earlier that big club that came from a Physcene Hercules figure. This actually came with the same figure. That one figure came with 2 clubs. And then also this shield here, which I picked up a couple of these and I sold them recently. But this is a very cool shield from Physcene as well. That those 2 weapons I think really adds a lot. But what I love is this armor that he has on here. So this actually comes from, the name of the company is Asmus, ASMUS, and they're the ones doing these 12-inch Lord of the Rings figures. This actually came on a 12-inch Asmus Grishnak figure. So that's if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, that is the orc, I think it's an orc, that chases Merry and Pippin after they're taken by the Uruk-hai. They're on their way back to Isengard. When Merry and Pippin escape and they escape into Fanghorn Forest, Grishnak is the one that chases them, who's eventually stepped on by Treebeard. So that character, that's a long-winded way of explaining who the character is, but this is the armor that the 12-inch figure comes with, and it fits right over this toy, even to the point where I still used his normal waist armor, and it just looks so good together. And it really changes up the profile, the bulkiness, the way that figure looks. And actually, even another figure line here, on his back I'm using this sword. This is actually from the World of Warcraft line. The old World of Warcraft line. There's some figures in that line that are really large. A lot of times you can get them broken because they were like statues, so they tend to break. They fall or something. But you can find some cool pieces from that line as well that scale really well with the ogres. But I've used this piece again. I actually bought 2 of these armors, and I put one. This is one that I was playing around with in back. So this is nowhere near done, but this is just an example of me messing around with pieces to see if I can design something. And it actually uses a head that I've seen a number of people use on ogre-scale figures. This came with the Marvel Select Destroyer, I think it was. And this is the Odin head. So that Destroyer figure came with both the normal head and the Odin head. I had to Dremel it out to get it to fit. But even that, like, this is a 12-inch scale helmet from Physcene, and you put that on, that changes the look as well. And this helmet is great. This helmet, if you can find some 12-inch helmets, they work really well on figures as well. You throw that on the ogre. This is the custom Sabadam head, but it would fit on Kurzog as well. And you can start to really get some cool looks there. And again, these are all just using different parts. This piece here uses some new wrist armor that also came with that same Grishnak. It didn't fit, so I had to slice it. And, that's one thing that I would tell you is be aware that when you get these parts in, whether you get them from eBay, whether you get them from Monkey Depot or whatever, you're going to find some instances where the parts don't fit perfectly. They're too small. Again, too big is not a big problem. They're too small. So you got to be cognizant of the fact that you're going to probably spend some money every once in a while and get no return on it. You're going to get the piece and say, that doesn't fit the way I want it. This axe actually came with a McFarlane Toys Halo figure. I've had it in the fodder bin forever, but it just looked awesome with this figure. And these feet were from a Marvel Select, that same Marvel Select Hulk, Barbarian Hulk, that gave me that bone necklace. I pulled his feet off and painted them to say, like, hey, I wonder if I can get those to look. It's a little rough around the top here. I'm going to try to sculpt a little cuff around that. But again, this is just something I had in the back room. So to help be part of this conversation tonight, I brought him forward, thought it'd be fun to talk about. And I have a few other parts here that I want to show. So I was mentioning the parts from World of Warcraft. Same thing, like this is a World of Warcraft part that I've had put aside for a while, because at some point I'm going to do like, an ogre-scale shaman or whatever. And, this I think is a really good sized piece for him. And it's a super cool sculpt. It's got like a big hoof at the bottom and a lot of cool stuff out there. And this is one of the things that I do, is I always have my eyes open for these things. A few times a week, I will run the same searches. I'll go on eBay. I'll look on these different websites like Monkey Depot, just to try to see if there's any new product, if there's anything that I'm looking for. And you'd be amazed when, sometimes parts pop up. You'll see a little lot of parts. Jump on those things, grab them. You get some really cool stuff. I'm talking about not everything is a winner. So here's an example. This is a sword I got that it's a great looking sword. It's a great looking saber, but I feel like it's a little small. I mean, maybe not. I guess it works. It's a little too elegant for the ogres. So this is one that's just like in my fodder bins right now, waiting for there to be an ogre scale figure that I could imagine using an elegant blade like this. But the other thing to look out for is, we talked about 3D printing. So like a lot of people are doing the 3D printing heads and weapons, we've seen a few 3D printed heads for ogre scale. One thing that Len is going to be doing that's super cool, I showed this last week. So this is a piece that Len is going to have coming up with Wolf King Customs in the future. And it's just a hammer topper that fits right on that existing ogre scale weapon, which is nice because when talking to Len, when you print resin, trying to do a long handle piece like this, the stability of it would be challenging. So instead of trying to print a full hammer, it's cool that people like Len are, just like they're leveraging the existing figures to pop a head on, it's the same mentality to say, well, let me pop a new weapon piece on top. And, I painted this one to match this handle it goes with, but it's a gorgeous looking piece that really, I think, adds a lot to the figure. And this is another one that he showed recently when he posted a little teaser of Wolf King Customs. He showed this topper as well, which, while this one is really detailed and elegant, this one is the exact opposite. This one is very rough looking. Again, it just pops off. It's just a topper piece. Super easy to paint. That's the great thing about these is, even if you're like, I'm not a customizer, I'm not a painter, you spray paint this black, or even brush it black. Spray paint is just faster. You get this thing black, you get a little bit of silver metallic, dip your brush in, dry that brush off on your paper towel so it's nice and dry, and then you just dry brush this, and making this look like this, making this look like this. I know Steve Bisciotti hates when I give secrets away. This is literally 15 seconds worth of work. This is super, super easy. Painted black, a little bit of dry brushing, you get this gorgeous look. And this is something else that we're going to be seeing more of, being able to create, new looking figures, change up what we have, not only by using, existing parts from 12-inch scale figure lines, but leveraging what the artistic community is doing as well. So watch, I'm going to put this hammer in this guy's hands. Look how cool this is going to look. This guy, it's Odin, so he's already got that very Norse look to him as well. How cool does that look right there? Oh, there goes his head. So let's recap before we close it out for the night, and I'll be happy to jump to the comments and answer questions and we can close the night out that way by answering some questions. You want to customize your ogres. The places that I'm going to suggest you look, look on eBay, look at Monkey Depot, do a Google search for it. Look up 1/6 scale parts. That's what you're looking for. Be more specific on eBay, because if you just look up 1/6 scale parts, you're going to get a huge amount of results. Look up 1/6 scale sword, 1/6 scale armor, 1/6 scale axe. Start to get specific, and you'll start to 1/6 scale hammer. You'll start to see different things, and then you'll start to look at what companies make these parts. Then you can start searching for Ficene axe or Ficene sword or Mondo sword. Once you start to understand what the search terms are that return the results you want are, you can mine those more for additional results. So look up 1/6 scale parts. Think about figure lines that have oversized figures in them already, and look at their pieces, see what you can do there. Finally, think beyond weapons. Think about armor parts and how adding something like that, even like on this ogre here, this is actually metal. This is a metal armor piece that came with some kind of knight figure that I just pop right on there. And it really changes the aesthetic of that figure to have that shoulder armor. The ogres to date have not come with any shoulder armor, so something as simple as that is going to change up their look for you. So look at that as well. And finally, look at the 3D market. Look at what other people are doing across all of these different artist-owned companies now to put out new parts for these ogres that you can paint up, and you can create their profiles and create your own kinds of ogres and your own characters. Hope that was helpful. Hope that inspired some people to do some ogre customs. Let's go to the comments here and see what's going on. Leland says, and I'm going back a little ways. I got like 17 comments behind. I use 1/6 scale weapons, perfect scale. Yup. Matt says, I have one of those heads orders. Can't wait. Walter DeMarco, hey man, nice to see you. Great customs tonight. Walter saying, send me photos of the barbarian and that feat. That's a good idea. Yeah, I'll do that after, Walter. I gotcha. Leland was saying from the druid. Yes. So he's referring to this piece here. When I showed this, this was from a Warcraft druid figure. I bought a whole lot of Warcraft figures a couple of years ago. Actually, yeah, about a year and a half ago now. And again, a lot of them were broken, but I've used them for tons and tons of customs. And again, I still have parts of my fodder bins I haven't even gotten to yet. Leland saying that hammer, yeah, it's awesome. Eric, any inexpensive lines that we can swap feet for ogre scale boots? One that I haven't done yet, and it's not super inexpensive, but I have Marvel Legends, their 12-inch line. They did a 12-inch Thor. That 12-inch Thor, I feel would really work. I used mine to make a half frost giant before this scale was out, but I've been eyeing him, thinking if I want to pull him apart. There was a point that you could get that Thor for like $25. He seems to be going higher again, but I would look for that 12-inch Thor. And it's the Marvel Legends one. It's one that's like highly articulated. Comes with 2 different heads, 2 different hammers actually. He comes with one version of his hammer that looks regular, and one that's like almost like icy on it a little bit, simulating, I guess, the lightning effect that it's about to shoot forward. What else? Other lines that you can mine this stuff from. I haven't done a lot of swapping the feet. Like I said, I did those feet only because I had the Marvel Select Hulk that I was using. And honestly, these feet are a little big, but I also rationalized it that it's a gigantic ogre. Who's to say that he can't have slightly oversized feet, right? But yeah, maybe look at some Marvel Select Hulks. I know there's a couple Marvel Select Hulks that are actually pretty inexpensive. You might be able to get some mileage out of those. Anthony, what's the longest something sat in your fodder bin before you used it? I've had a Soul Calibur 2 sword that finally got used after 15 years. You got me beat, buddy. I don't think I have. I don't think I've. I don't have enough patience to keep things around for that long. I've mentioned in the past, jokingly, I've said the quickest way to find a use for fodder that you can't find a use for is to sell it. Because the minute you sell that fodder, you will need it for something. And I've done that so many times. I just did it the other day. Literally just got rid of some stuff and was like, oh, I could have used that. So I don't think that I definitely don't have 15 years. Patrick Royal says I have items from 20 years ago waiting to use. I will say this: I have pieces in the. I don't have fodder that's that old, but I have pieces in the collection that are that old, like spawn pieces, that I will go back to and tear apart. And sometimes I will tear them apart, use what I need, and then I'll rebuy it to replace it in the collection. And other times I'm just like, yeah, I didn't really care that much for it anyway. It was just, it was there. It was cool enough, but I don't care enough to actually replace it. So there definitely have been some old Spawn stuff that I've had lying around that I've cannibalized. Timothy Peak, there should be no secrets in customizing. I agree, which is why I do shows like this and why I share all the information I can. Mike Wells, lots of good information and tips. Thanks, Jeremy. You are welcome, Mike. Thank you, Jeremy. David saying Titan Marvel Legends might work. Yeah, I assume the Titans are the ones that are not articulated very much. They're really cheap, but not in a good way. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they have ankle articulation. Like, I feel like one of the ways they get the price points down on that is that they almost have like the 5-point articulations, you know. So anything that you do, you want it to have a foot. And I mean, the same principle that I showed when I did the episode on how to swap feet out, it's the exact same principle with what I did with these feet. These feet actually, they weren't rockers. They were just kind of swivel. So when I pulled them off the Hulk, I had to slice out, I had to take an X-Acto blade and slice out the disc that was there so I could get this curve. Once I had that curve, I took a drill bit and I drilled a hole right in the front of the foot to simulate the actual way that the Mythic Legions feet connect. And I just heated the foot to make it nice and pliable, plug that right in. I feel like the Titans aren't going to allow you to do that. That even if you try to slice those feet off and mimic it, I feel like the Titans, if I'm thinking about the right ones, I feel like their plastic might even be hollow. So I don't know if those would work, but something like that, yeah. I mean, it's worth looking into. Walter saying makes great for capes. Yeah, I mean, I've done capes even just with, fabric from Michaels or something. Buy a big piece of fabric and slice it up. One of the beautiful things of it being a fantasy world is stuff doesn't have to be perfectly tailored, especially when you're doing ogres. Things shredded and ripped apart. That works really, really well. Yeah, Walter's saying he likes the hammer that Len made. Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece. I don't even know what I do with it. Oh, I forgot that I couldn't find it. I forgot that he's holding it now. Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece. People are going to love that when they get it. I'm not sure when he's going to be putting that on sale, but I know that it's in his plans. So what else you want to talk about? It's 8:48. I got a few more minutes. James saying, any idea what paint color would be closest to Torgun's skin tone? So James, what I always tell people is I am by far not the right person to give paint tips on how to paint match. Everything I do is guesswork. I have a bunch of paints and I pick and choose. So I just did one. If you saw the piece that I posted today, which presumably is why you're asking me this, I posted my Dwarven Bard, which uses the big bellied torso that Sabadom and Planetary Dog Toys just released. And I had to match the paint for Torgun to do that because the arms plug in and the head plugs on. I'll leave you a little secret. I mixed up a couple different flesh tones. I put it on there and I looked at the result and said, "Oh my God, I got it like first shot." I was incredibly surprised. Incredibly surprised. I have had plenty of customs where I've tried to match it and I haven't been able to get it really right. So then I end up actually painting some highlights on the other parts that I was trying to match the part that I just painted. I've done that trick a few times. If you really want to know how to match paints, look up Nikki Nicole Cheney. I'm sure you know who she is. But she's been doing a bunch of tutorials on her Instagram page, and she's been sharing a lot on the Cabal as well, showing some of the ways that she matches paints and what some of her process is. She's way, way, way better at that than I am. I just guess and, hope for the best, and I get pretty lucky. But if you actually want someone that can help you do it yourself, she's the person to look up for that. Dennis Derby is really good with it too, but I know specifically that she's been sharing tutorials on that exact topic. Yes, trial and error. Very much trial. I will say that a lot of times what I do is I mix a little bit, and then the part that I'm going to paint, I put a little bit of dab. Like if I'm trying to paint a torso or whatever, say I'm trying to match something, I'll paint it. Like the best part to do it on a Mythic Legions figure is the lower part of the torso, since it's going to get covered by the folds armor anyway. So I'll paint a little bit there, and then if it doesn't match, like say that I'm trying to match arms to a torso. So the torso is the control piece. I'll paint it at the bottom of the torso to see if the paint actually blends really, really well. If it doesn't, I wipe it off right away. And even if there's a tiny smudge there, it's going to get covered, so it doesn't matter. But that's how I usually match, trial and error, doing that. And then once I feel like, okay, that looks really good, it blends really, really nicely, then I'll paint the arms or the head or whatever I'm trying to match to the torso. Daniel says, is there a particular brand of paint color you will be using to paint the foxes? I want to make sure I match it exact when I paint the neck joint. So that is impossible. I'm going to tell you. Well, it's not possible. It's hard. I will be happy to show what paint I am using. I am using spray paint for it to base everything out with. You get a nice even coat. I'm doing some spray paint. And then after the spray paint, the highlights, the white, like I'm just talking about the orange one. The white underneath it will be brush painted, the nose, the eyes. But to match the orange, I will share what spray paint I'm using. The challenge is that the pieces come in, they're gray resin. So I'm coating over gray. And whenever you paint something, if you're doing black, it's fine. Black's going to cover anything. But something like orange, one of the reasons that I painted so many kitsune heads to begin with was to really get down the process so I could replicate it fairly consistently to do a batch of these for everybody. So the reason I say that is when you get the neck, it's really, really hard to match it exactly because the color you're starting with is not the same as the color that the head itself started with. The head is starting with that gray resin. The neck is not starting gray. So that's one of the things to be mindful of. I know that even on the ones that I have, the necks don't match perfectly. However, the heads sit down pretty far on the neck that you don't even see. It's not that big a deal. If you really want to match it exactly, what you probably would have to do is paint the neck gray to begin with and then spray over that to try to have a similar type base color that you're trying to cover. But Daniel, I will share the exact paint I'm using. It's off-the-shelf paint. I got it at Michael's. I actually just bought another can today off of Amazon just to prepare myself in case I need more. Yeah, Walter's saying Dennis is great at paint matching as well. Yeah, I mentioned him too. James saying the pieces say they're sold out. They just haven't been listed for sale yet. I mentioned last week there's there's no setting apparently on that website to say coming soon. It's either in stock or out of stock. So Len wanted everyone to see what's going to be available and see what the prices were. So rather than not putting them up at all, he put them up there but made them out of stock. So Saturday at 3, things will go in stock and they'll be available for sale. And honestly, once he hits the numbers that he's set for this initial order, he'll turn them off stock. So Anthony's saying getting choppy, so I'm going to wrap this up. Weird, it's getting choppy again around the same time. And that is actually a good segue into what I want to end with tonight. So I absolutely love doing this show. I love sharing this time with you on the Cabal. But the challenges that I've been having with the choppy audio, with the video dropping, I've been spending a lot of time outside of this show trying to troubleshoot that, trying to figure out what the problem actually is. And ultimately, I feel like the problem is Facebook. I feel like Facebook is compressing the video, is compressing the stream in some cases, and that's what's causing the issues. So I've spoken to a number of people that do broadcasts, that do blogs. My wife is going to kill me, guys. And everyone is kind of pointing me the same way. They're suggesting that I actually should be doing this on YouTube. So my plan as of right now is that next week's show is going to be my last Mythic Conversations in this format. I'm still going to do the show, but it's going to change a little bit. So the plan is that next week I will be back here with you, and next week is going to be viewer's choice. So I'm going to put up something on Monday talking about this, but next week I'm not going to have a presentation. I'm going to answer any questions you have, and I'm going to open these up to you. Look at my gallery, look at my work, anything that you see there that I haven't sold that I still have here. If you want me to take it out and show it and talk about it, why I did it, how I did it, I'm happy to do that. I think that would be a cool way to close up the Mythic Conversations series here on the Mythic Legions Cabal. But for everyone that really does enjoy doing this show, I'm not going away. What I'm going to try doing is I'm going to try switching this to YouTube Live. So YouTube Live is super easy. You can jump on. You can follow me there. It's a really, really similar format. It is nice, too, because some other people that may not have been introduced to the Cabal yet will be able to jump on and share it as well. So that's not going to be next week. I'll be back here next week for one more time. And then hopefully when we move to YouTube, we'll be able to do this without having any of these audio problems. Additionally, when we go to YouTube, what I'm hoping to be able to do is expand the show a little bit and have some episodes where I can bring on special guests, where we can actually have like interviews where it's not just me talking at you or answering questions for an hour and a half, but maybe we can bring in some of my fellow customizers and they can comment as well. They can talk to you as well. So that's the plan for now. One more time next week. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Hope to see you next week. And I hope to see you in subsequent weeks when we do Mythic Conversations 2.0 starting on YouTube. And hopefully that will be a better presentation. No audio problems, no video problems, but all the same great content. So with that, I'm going to leave you tonight. Saturday, remember, 3 p.m. Eastern, wolfkingcustoms.com. The Legends of the Kitsune series is going to be available. Please, if you're interested, jump on, grab them. It would mean a ton to me to see people using these. I can't wait to hear what you think about them when you get them in stock. Walter just said, when I do it on YouTube as well, I will absolutely link that feed here. So even if you can't join me live there will still be easy ways for you to get that on the Cabal. I'm not going to forget about the Cabal at all. In fact, what I'm planning to do is do different live videos on the Cabal. So here I'm doing these presentations. I'm doing a show. what I'm thinking is, let me make Mythic Conversations the show that I produce. And I want to even do more production for the show. Let me do that on YouTube. But maybe let me do some live videos here that are a little more sporadic. They won't be as scheduled, but maybe when I'm back in the workshop and I'm actually working on something, that might be a good opportunity to go live and just say, hey, I'm working on this right now, and just kind of chat with you while I'm actually in the process of doing stuff. I might not be giving a lesson on anything. It might just be me doing what I'm doing and talking and chatting. But what Walter does on Sundays, where he just goes lives and he just goes live and he chats, that's awesome. That's a lot of fun. So I think that there's an area for that too. There's where I can just be a little more spontaneous and do that as well, and still have the live interactions on the Cabal. That's what I'm thinking. Again, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. I will see you next week here and hopefully on YouTube in the future. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.